The Bob Murphy Show, episode 385.
There's a tidal wave coming. What you gonna do?
Get ready for another episode of The Bob Murphy Show, the podcast promoting free markets, free minds, and grateful souls. It's your source for commentary and interviews conducted by a Christian and economist. Now here's your host, Bob Murphy.
Hey everybody, welcome back to The Bob Murphy Show. This episode, I'm speaking with Mikkel Thorup, who is the founder and CEO of ExPat Money, which is, I just realized I did a whole interview with him and we never actually spelled it out. I think most of you know, but expat is short for expatriate, right? So somebody who leaves the country and goes and lives abroad for various reasons. So that's what Mikkel's area of expertise is. I should mention, though, he also has people set up what he calls a plan B, right? So in other words, even if you're not going to move out of the country imminently, but just to have some things set up so you have your options available, right? So he talks about that as well. So I'm not going to dwell anymore on his background or qualifications because I have him do that when we jump into the interview. And also, just so you understand the scope of it, the middle third, let's say, of our discussion is basically me just asking him about global events. And then on the beginning and then at the end, we get more specifically into, his area in terms of preparing yourself financially and perhaps living abroad. So without further ado, here is my discussion with Mikkel Thorup. Mikkel, welcome to the Bob Murphy Show.
Bob, thank you so much for having me. This is going to be awesome. I've been looking forward to this conversation all week.
I have been looking forward to it as well, just because there's a lot going on the international stage, and you're certainly the guy to ask. So people either have heard of you or they would have heard my pre-recorded intro and gotten a little taste. But since I am just going to be asking largely for your opinion on various international topics, maybe can you just give a background, take as much time as you want to explain, why do you have experience in this? Does your opinion matter more than the average Joe's in terms of geopolitical affairs?
Sure. So, if people have heard me before, they've probably heard all about my backstory. So I'll probably skip over a lot of the details, but basically what you need to know is I was born in Southwestern Ontario, Canada. I left school at a very young age, dropped out of school at 12 years old, completely self-taught, autodidact, started traveling internationally as a teenager. I will be 42 next week or 2 weeks from now, something like that. And I've just never stopped. So this is my 25th year overseas as an expat and working through these things. I did it first on the hobby level for probably 10, 12 years, and then got into it at a consulting level. And then I started my company, ExPat Money, expatmoney.com, about 8-9 years ago. And we help with taking people offshore. So huge amount of background as a guinea pig, testing things out. The client side, we work with mostly Americans and Canadians, high net worth individuals, families, things like this, bring them overseas. We deal with their taxes, their immigration, their investment, the lifestyle. But then also from the personal side, as I mentioned, I'm Canadian, but my wife, she's from mainland China. We met in Germany, got married in Africa. Our first child was born in the Middle East, second child born in Brazil, third child born in Chile. We own real estate in 9 different countries. We currently live here in Panama, where I'm talking to you from today. In Panama, bank internationally. So we really do this on all levels, through and through and through. 9, 10, 15 hours a day, every day, 7 days a week for decades. So, happy to take the conversation in whatever direction you like, but still super passionate about the work. Love what I do. Love helping starve the beast. Describe it as the practical side of libertarian, if that makes sense.
Okay, well, what you just said, so thank you for that. And what you just said tied into the next sort of introductory question I was going to ask is, it's not merely that you have a lot of experience as an expat, but also, you're very well steeped in libertarianism. Can you just give a little background on that? And also too, in terms of your economics, like I know you had me on one of your panels. So are you a fan of like the Austrian school in particular, or is it just more general? Anyway, whatever, just to give people a little bit of flavor more of where you're coming from.
Definitely. So, as I mentioned in the intro, I left school at a very young age. I am venomously opposed to state education, public education. I stopped going to school at 12 years old, and at 15, I officially dropped out. I have learned my craft by immense amount of reading and study, self-directed study, by being mentored and by testing it, as I mentioned. I think that, going through public education and the horrendous experience I had through that really drove me to libertarianism from a very young age. Full transparency, when I say libertarianism, I mean small L, not big L. I don't understand. I don't know anything about the LP or the political party. It's more a philosophical side of things. The non-aggression principle is my North Star. It's how I run my business. It's our core values. It's how I run my family as the head of the household, how we run our family office. Like, most of my wealth is set up in a family office structure. Everything is in writing through the libertarian side. I think it's the most honest and ethical way to do things. And the more that I hold myself accountable and personal responsibility and follow these things, the better my life is on every single aspect. My marriage is better. The relationship with my children is better. My business is better. I make more money. My investments do better. I've traveled to 110 plus countries over the last 25 years. I've studied many different types of philosophical and political and ideologies during that time. The best that I have found, for lack of a better word, the best I have found is libertarianism. Now, if we break down what kind of libertarian, I mean, I kind of gravitate to an anarcho-capitalist or an agorist type of mentality, but I'm not. I don't worry too much about the labels or anything like that. It's more of a North Star, as I described before.
You're sort of a non-denominational libertarian.
Exactly.
So.
There we go.
Okay, great. So I think what I'll do, for folks at home and also Mikkel, just to guide you in terms of the time I had with you, I think maybe I'll ask you some big picture stuff about like just geopolitical arena, and then the last batch of stuff I want to ask you about is more specifically tuned to your particular line of work and, for people who want to go expat, but just maybe to cater to people who they know, I'm not leaving the country anytime soon, but I want to know this guy seems like he knows a lot. And plus he's coming from my perspective. So I think the first thing I want to ask you, and I'm genuinely curious just to get your take on it, is Trump comes in. He's done some jaw-dropping stuff, in my view, in the first few weeks, and he's also been doing a lot on the international arena. And so can you tell us your take on however you want to handle it in terms of like, how is he coming off in other regions? Because a lot of Americans, as I'm sure we live in a bubble and all we really hear about is from ourselves talking to each other. So anyway, what's your thought in terms of how is Trump being received on the global stage?
Well, I think that in general, I think it's being received very well. I mean, I'm sure the leftists and the commies, their head is exploding right now. How could this happen? But I mean, my people are very bullish on the fact that Trump's coming in, and it gives us a little bit of breathing room. A lot of my work is helping people set up a plan B. And, like you mentioned, some people will move overseas and other people won't. But people who come to me, it's not contingent on them moving to another country. A lot of times people just want to have an overseas bank account and a second property and, a residency in case, things get bad and they need somewhere to go. So it kind of acts more like political insurance. Now, there's been a frenzy of activity with Trump since he took office, and it's been pretty wild to see all of these things. I actually just put out an email the other day, which is like, because we made some comment of, I don't follow U.S. politics. And it's like, I had to clarify. It's like, I don't follow domestic U.S. politics, but I follow geopolitics or international politics. And actually, I have a very long-standing history following these things, and I understand a lot of this. So when I talk about Trump, I specifically am talking about to his international plans and what he's doing in the rest of the world. And for me, that is a very clear separation between the two. The big one that happened, even in his inauguration speech, is the Panama Canal. He made all these comments about we're being ripped off by the Panama Canal and it's being controlled by China and Chinese troops and all these things. So we actually did a rebuttal article kind of going through all of these things point by point. It's well worth checking out on our website at expatmoney.com. And if you just use the search function, you'll find it in about 2 seconds. But
and we'll link to that too, obviously, folks.
Amazing. We really proved that a lot of his comments had nothing to do with reality, because he had some comments or some rhetoric of, 36,000 Americans gave their life to build the canal. And it's like, well, that's not exactly true. Maybe that many people died, but they weren't Americans. That was mostly, people from the Caribbean who were working there, or when it was done by the French under the previous plans for it, or local Panamanians, or even Chinese workers who came in. And the Chinese, by the way, they're not from mainland China, they're from Hong Kong. So you'll see that it's Cantonese on the street, it's not Mandarin. It's big differences in these types of things. And actually, don't get me wrong, people get very, up in very sensitive about this, but I think it's like really disrespectful when you say, oh, it's all these Americans who gave their life. And it's like, no, actually, these were Panamanians who gave their life for these things. And it actually wasn't during the U.S. construction of the canal. It was during the French construction, and that was via malaria. And so there was a whole bunch of things that were not done right. Then he sends Marco in, and they came down and they had some meetings here in Panama. And it was basically agreed that they would not renew the contracts with China for the Belt and Road Initiative. And so he was here for, 48 hours or something, and he left. And now it's gone quiet on the Panama Canal. I think in the end, really what he was doing is he was marking his territory. He was saying, all right, this is our sphere of influence. We have the Arctic. This is the Greenland part. This is as far north. We've already clearly got the Atlantic and the Pacific. And now our southern border is actually not the wall with Mexico. It goes all the way down to Panama. That's our southern border. And everything inside that, falls within the sphere of influence, which is fine. Like, I'm okay with that. And I think most Panamanians are okay with that. We've always had very good relations with the U.S. Most Panamanians would love to spend time in the U.S. and to go there, and they've got family there, and they remit money, and like a lot of Central American countries, we love the U.S. My request, I guess, would be that if that is the U.S.'s sphere of influence, then let Russia have their sphere of influence. Let China have their sphere of influence. Like, what's the U.S. Coast Guard going up and down the Taiwan Strait? That makes no sense. Like, get out of there. Well, why are you guys sending, why is collective West sending so much weapons to Ukraine? That was Russia's sphere of influence. That was their buffer zone between Europe and, NATO and their borders. So we'll see what happens. But I think that he's, my hope would be that he will be the president of peace, and he will be rolling back a lot of these forever wars that are around the world. And he will concentrate on fixing domestic and his international, although they will always have, influence everywhere in the world, just bring it a little bit closer to home.
Okay. Yeah, I do want to follow up on some of those other issues, but just to be clear, was your hypothesis with the Panama Canal that Trump was just sort of announcing that is a shocking thing, and then really he just wanted the Panamanians to stop with the Belt and Road Initiative with China?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, in my opinion, he was just negotiating. He's beating them up publicly, putting everyone on their toes, making it, so people, are very worried and stressed out. And then, they come down and negotiate. And then Panama's like, okay, this is what you want. Fine. And then they moved on, because they talk about all these things about, oh, they're being screwed over. They're going to be, the treaties, they're not following the treaties and stuff, but it's not true. I mean, none of it is true. Actually, the agreement clearly states that no country should have an advantage over any other country with the toll prices. So what the U.S. is being charged is the same as any other nation that is being charged. So, I mean, he didn't actually renegotiate the prices at all. The main thing was to get the Belt and Road Initiative out of Panama. And I think Panama was quite okay with that.
For the benefit of the listeners who don't know what that is, can you just give the big picture as to what is the Belt and Road Initiative?
It's an overall trade. agreement and pathway for getting Chinese goods around the world. So they're basically redoing the Silk Road, and then they have ports around the world where they would have access to goods and free trade for China's interest. So there was a lot of rhetoric that the Chinese had ports and were controlling the Panama Canal, which once again is not exactly true, because these were Hong Kong companies that were both at both sides of the canal. There's more than a dozen ports here at the Panama Canal. Some are Panamanian, some are American, some are Chinese, and the agreements for these ports were done in the late '90s. So it's not like, and that's when when Hong Kong was a lot more independent than it is right now, and they were all approved. No one had a problem with it until 3 weeks ago or something like that.
Mhm.
And then there was all this rhetoric, oh, there's Chinese troops there. Well, it's not a true statement. I mean, they went and examined and they looked, and I live in downtown Panama City. We're not seeing Chinese military. I mean, it's just completely ludicrous.
Okay. You mentioned it. What are your thoughts that ostensibly, and Trump campaigned on this, and if anything, the allegation from his critics is that he's taken orders from Putin. So, whether someone likes it or not, do you predict that they really are going to reach a settlement there, and that we're not going to see violence between Russia and Ukraine 6 months from now?
That would be my hope. I genuinely hope that he will end the war. I mean, I think that they did everything in the final days of the previous administration to make it so that he couldn't walk back any of these things, sending the ATACMS and stuff like that, and into Russia is just mind-boggling, and not informing President Trump of what was happening and what they were doing. I mean, I think the entire behavior was disgusting. I am always on the side of peace. I lived in the Middle East for a decade. I saw what was happening to neighboring countries. I've visited to so many countries that have been affected by war. I will always be on the side of peace, and I truly hope that Trump will follow through and end this senseless conflict.
On that point, I made a remark. I'm trying to remember how it came up. It was on Twitter. People were saying stuff. I was going back and forth with them. And I forget again what the original thing was, but I had this throwaway line, something like, well, at the very least, it looks like, Trump is doing his best to put out the fire of the budding World War III that the previous administration was desperately trying to start after they lost the election. I said something like that. And then I had a bunch of guys pushing back on me, and I'm curious as to how you would have responded. And they were saying, like, what interest would it have been for the people in the Biden administration to start World War III? Like, they were just acting like, come on, that's completely crazy. Why would they, so obviously I was doing a bit of a hyperbole,
crazy.
But what would you have said about that?
Okay, well, first of all, I try not to engage, in back and forth with people on these types of platforms. So I probably just would have ignored it. But I mean,
well, yeah, that would have been the wisest course. But yeah,
I mean, everything showed that they were pushing for destruction. I mean, every single policy that the previous administration did was horrible. Like, try to name for me one good policy that they came forward with. Like, I don't know any. Like, it was so bizarre to watch. You would think if it was just stupidity and ignorance, that at least they would have done a couple of things right. But I can't think of one thing that they did that was good for humanity or for the US, for their own people. So, I mean, the logical conclusion is that this was on purpose, that they are purposefully trying to destroy things. So, I mean, I guess that would probably be my response. Like, I can't think of anything that was good.
Okay. Another one for you. What about El Salvador? There's a lot going on, especially the interaction with the hard money, Bitcoin community, but beyond that, other things as well. So what do you want to tell us about El Salvador?
So I first went to El Salvador in 2003, 2004, something like that. I took 18 months and hitchhiked and backpacked around Central and South America. And I've had an opportunity to go back to El Salvador since then. And it's been amazing to kind of watch the country grow. I really like some of what Bukele is doing. I think it's amazing that he has legalized Bitcoin as legal tender. I think that's fantastic. I'm sure I'll get hate mail for this, but cleaning up a lot of the violence in the country. People always push back and they say, okay, well, what about the human rights? I'm like, all right, yes, but he arrested everybody who had face tattoos and like little teardrops of people that they've murdered, tattoos on their face for that. Like, the situation was really, really bad there. I'll have to kind of close one eye, about human rights violations on that. But I think the best thing that the Bukele family is doing and the administration in El Salvador is doing is that they are seeking outside help on how to fix their country and looking at best practices for other countries. I know this because I've traveled down there to meet with government officials and consult directly with the government. They're very curious on how to bring expats into the country. My work is what I do for a living, how to bring foreign direct investment in. We're actually, possibly officially consulting to the Bukele family. We'll see how that all plays out, but we're in active talks with them right now. And I just think it's so wonderful when a government will actually try to go out there and find the best people in the world to consult with them and not think that they know the answers to everything, because there's a certain amount of arrogance that often happens in politics where they think they know everything. And it's like, you clearly don't. Like, You've never done anything with your life. You've never created anything. You've never built anything. You've never been anywhere. You're a career politician. But El Salvador, they genuinely want to learn, and you can see that with the people they've brought in for Bitcoin, with many different industries. So I'm very excited to see what's going to happen in that country.
Okay, well, since we're talking about Bitcoin, do you have any comments on Trump, for example? Was it at I forget where it was, the WEF, or recently he was saying how he wants to make the U.S. the crypto and AI capital of the world, and certainly a lot of the particular moves he's made domestically seem to, like, he's not just saying that he actually is taking steps, having a working group on digital assets and things like that. So do you have any thoughts in terms of maybe with your clients, people you're talking to, as to people who are building in the crypto space? Are they realizing, oh, wow, there really is a pretty big difference between the previous and the current administration?
So I would love to see the U.S. lead the charge in crypto. I doubt it's going to happen. I think that there's already been a massive brain drain in that space already. I do not like the Bitcoin strategic reserve ideas. I think the last thing I would want is the government owning massive amounts of crypto, like specifically, the Leviathan of the US government owning Bitcoin, or BlackRock and going in and having a fork and changing things like this. I think that's a terrible idea. From the technology standpoint, yeah, it would be wonderful if the US could push ahead in these things. But I mean, my client base is not crypto bros or crypto millionaires, Lambos. I mean, that's not my people. My people, like, my number one client is lawyers, accountants, doctors, financial planners, dentists, basically highly paid professionals are mostly the people I work with. That and small business owners, especially in the brick and mortar space. Lots of guys who, have an asphalt company, or general contractors, or roofing companies, or fencing, or, stairs. Like, they build stairs for a living and they got 50 guys who work underneath them, and the CEO of a stair company. We help those types of people build, offshore, plan B types of things, or move them overseas and consult with them. But mine are not, Bitcoin millionaires, who are looking at these things. Like, not that I couldn't help people, but it's just not my regular client base. So I don't.
Gotcha. Okay, can you just elaborate a bit on, so you're obviously friendly to crypto and Bitcoin specifically, but you're saying you don't like the idea, and just for people who are maybe not have heard, that there has been a growing chorus calling for a strategic Bitcoin reserve. Senator Loomis, for example, I think unveiled it at the Nashville Bitcoin conference last summer as we record this. And, Trump said some things along those lines, the idea being that, hey, the U.S. government, it has, it's got gold reserves, it's got oil reserves, strategic petroleum reserves. Why not have Bitcoin? And, if the price jumps up, then they can pay down the debt and things like that. So what would be your concern about that?
Well, okay. The idea of Bitcoin, in my not so humble opinion, is a peer-to-peer, permissionless payment system. So, they keep trying to change the idea of Bitcoin. Okay, it's digital gold, it's a Swiss bank account, it's with this, it's with that. I mean, I've been into Bitcoin since it was 3 figures, and I've been using it in everyday life for many, many years. I bought an apartment 100% in Bitcoin, and that was a cool feeling. And I didn't have to do KYC. I didn't have to ask a permission from anybody. I just saw something and I bought it because I wanted to. And so I want to protect those rights that I can use cryptocurrency for. Bringing the government involved, I mean, that sounds like a terrible idea. This is like a defensive weapon we have to protect ourselves. And you want to give it to the government. It's one thing like, okay, El Salvador making it legal tender. It's totally different, the US. And then a lot of the Bitcoin that the US has, it's from confiscation, it's from forfeitures. And, they're not out there mining it or something like this. Like they're out there stealing it. I mean, like, I don't know exactly, every single Bitcoin where they got it from, but you start learning about asset forfeiture. It's pretty wild how this works and the split and how the different departments can divvy up this thing. So, and then what's a normal person to do? Okay, you take them to court and then they bury you in red tape, and your chances of getting back your asset are like slim to none. Well, it doesn't sound very fun to me. So I think self-custody Bitcoin, I think that's a much better option.
Okay. And just one last one on this topic, because you had said it, also one of the things you mentioned when you first brought it up was it concerns you like either the U.S. government owning it or BlackRock, and you said that they could do some kind of fork. So it's part of the concern beyond what you just enumerated that if the ownership is concentrated in a few of these big players, that they might have an undue sway over the direction that the network takes.
Well, I've heard some rumors that with BlackRock, with their ETFs, they're going to fork it, and that's the one that they're going to support. And I mean, I don't trust any of them. Let's just put it at that. Okay. And I trust.
Okay, so what you're saying, the rumor is BlackRock's going to do a fork, and then if the U.S. government comes on the scene buying massive amounts, that's what. Did you mean Bitcoin Cash? Or did you mean BTC? And then if BlackRock has its fork, you're saying they could be funneling effectively hundreds of millions or billions of tax dollars into that and make anoint it as the next
is the new. I mean, fork. I don't know. I've studied these stuff pretty in depth, and we'll see what happens. I do believe in the Bitcoin network and the community that surrounds Bitcoin. I have full faith that people will make good decisions, but I just don't trust the government at all. So,
okay, fair enough. All right. Well, on this general topic, and what you had me on a panel with some others for your previous Expat Money Summit is the topic of de-dollarization globally. So, what are your thoughts on that?
So, I think that it is happening. I mean, there's no question at this point it's happening. You can look year after year and see how much settlement is done between countries in US dollars, and it's on a decline. Do I think that tomorrow we're going to wake up and the US dollar is not going to have value? No, I don't. I think it will be a slow and gradual process over the next couple of decades. And I don't think that, in the next couple of decades, that it will completely lose its reserve status. But I do think that there will be new players in the space. I think that the BRICS is very much an up-and-coming type of settlement platform. And I think the previous administration ensured that would happen with the sanctions to Russia and what they were doing, removing from SWIFT and confiscating assets, once again, going back to asset confiscation. So,
Mikkel, can you just spell that out? Because that comes up a lot, the SWIFT payment system. Can you just explain what is that and what exactly did the Biden administration do that has people like saying, wow, that they kind of crossed the Rubicon there?
Yeah. So SWIFT is a messaging service for banks for people think it's a payment system. It's actually like small packets of information on sending. So it's a settlement that we use for international banking, and they removed the ability to access the SWIFT network. It's I don't know the exact date, 1970 something, 1960 something. We've been using SWIFT, and it just kind of cut them out of the overall ability to pay for and to receive payment for goods through standard Western banking apparatuses. So now what's happening is Russia is selling natural gas and other assets to India, to China, to other countries out there in RMB, in other currencies. They're doing other things. They're not using US dollars anymore. Previous administration did this as a measure to try to cripple the Russian economy when Russia invaded or had this military operation in Ukraine. I'm not saying what they did in Ukraine is right or good or just or anything like that. It's not at all. But let's not make any delusions here. It was absolutely NATO who pushed for these types of things and antagonized it and went forwards to start this war. This was they Western media wants to paint it as this crazy dictator who did this out of nowhere with no signs, and no one knew that this was happening. But he's constantly warned about it over and over and over again. Everyone was aware of it, and it would be like, setting missile batteries and things like that in Mexico or in Canada. Of course, the U.S. would absolutely freak out in a situation like that and go in to stop it. But it seems to be okay that Western and NATO forces do it to Russia. Anyways, to go back to the previous administration, they put all these sanctions on Russia, and they thought they would be able to cripple the economy. And with such, they would have Putin would be overthrown. And it's not done that. It's done the exact opposite. The Russian economy is doing great. The ruble is doing amazing. And if anything, it's just strengthened the relationships between China and Russia. So now there are multiple countries who are trading outside of the US dollar. Even Saudi Arabia is trading their oil in RMB with China. So these types of behaviors is accelerating de-dollarization.
Hey, folks, let's take a break from the action to discuss today's sponsor. Now, let me ask you, what if your gold could grow over time so that you're not just preserving, but growing your wealth in an asset that can't get inflated away by more money printing? Well, with Monetary Metals' Gold Lease program, clients can earn 3% annual interest on their gold paid every single month in more ounces of physical gold. And if you're an accredited investor, you can earn even higher yields in their bond offerings. Previous bond offerings have paid 6%, 12%, and even as high as 19%, all in ounces of physical gold and silver. So let me ask you, would you rather have 3% paid in dollars or 3% paid in gold? This is a no-brainer for gold owners. Now's the time to secure your wealth and build your legacy in an asset that the government can't inflate away. You get any price appreciation in gold for the year, plus free storage and a 3% yield. Join thousands of investors earning interest in physical gold and silver every month with Monetary Metals, and that includes me. I'm also one of their clients. To learn more, go to monetary-metals.com/Murphy. Again, go to monetary-metals.com/Murphy to see more. Okay, let's get back to the action. Right, and I think, too, it's just for people to understand, you obviously know way more about this particular topic than I do, but just the research that I had done, I think there are plenty of countries where it's not that they were planning on going to war with the U.S. anytime soon, but they just realized that is a lot of power that the U.S. government has. They could just flip a switch, and then we can't use international banking, right? In other words, they could be pretty sure, we're never going to do something where the U.S. government is going to be dropping bombs on our capital because their public wouldn't go for that. But if the U.S. government just comes up with some story because they're mad at us about something and that's why we got to cut them off from SWIFT, the American public's not going to care. And so I think a lot of governments realize we're kind of vulnerable right now if we're utterly dependent on the U.S. dollar-based global financial system.
You're 100% right, Bob. I mean, just like I work with Plan Bs so people have more options, countries and different administrations around the world, they need their own Plan Bs as well. They want to have options. So if they can also transact and trade for goods and services in additional currencies outside of the US dollar, then they are exploring these options. I think that countries were already exploring it, but now it just put it into hyperdrive. Now they realized how important it was and that they needed to do it very, very fast. So, I mean, it was, once again, I don't think it was negligence or stupidity by the previous administration. I think that a lot of this is just very purposeful to destroy Western society.
And the interesting thing too about something like the reserve currency status is it's I agree with you that, that was my prediction too. And as I said in the panel, I thought it was going to be a gradual erosion, perhaps with punctuated jumps. I did say, though, I thought it was going to happen a lot more quickly than most commentators believe. But what's interesting is it's the kind of thing where, if there's a bubble, it's like, well, as long as it doesn't break, then it's okay. But then once it starts going, it can be pretty fast. And I think it's the same thing here, that part of the reason, why are these foreigners using the U.S. dollar? Because all these foreigners use the U.S. dollar. But once, there really is this movement to break out of it, I think that argument kind of falls away, because objectively, looking at how much treasury debt there is and things like, there's a lot of objective reasons. You would think people around the world, if they were starting from scratch today, would not say, hey, let's be utterly dependent on the U.S. dollar. It's just they kind of inherited this system. But once somebody provides a viable alternative, I think a lot of people are going to flock to that.
Yeah, I mean, if you're the reserve currency, you have a responsibility. You need to be neutral at all times. That's what it means to be the reserve currency. You can't just not like some administration, or you don't like them because, I don't know, whatever, and you just want to turn it off. Like, what's going to happen in the future? Oh, you're not hitting your climate reduction. We're going to turn you off. Oh, it's not enough ESG in there. We need some more transgenders in your administration or corporations over there. So we're going to turn off your ability. I mean, it's a weapon that they can wield at any time. And I think that really was highlighted to governments around the world. And I don't think they liked it. So this is the result.
So when you say, the BRICS, in general, can you just speculate as much as you're willing to stick your neck out in terms of, all right, so 15 years from now, what does it look like? Is it that people are using gold, they're using Bitcoin, they're using, the BRICS countries formally issue some sort of thing that's a basket? What, any thoughts on that?
So I've been exploring this for a couple of years, and I've interviewed many people about it and tried to read and research and think through and meditate on what makes the most amount of sense. What I have come up with is most likely we will have a BRIC for, a BRICS currency, which will be used for settlement between nations, but not used in everyday life by citizens. Mm-hmm. So I would guess that it will be backed by gold, but it could also be backed by additional assets like oil or other types of valuable commodities. But if we look at the price of gold over the last, year, 13 months, 14 months, we're up about 40%. We're seeing, record delivery rates. The London Bullion Exchange is being emptied out. People are taking massive amounts of physical gold. Central banks around the world have been buying like crazy, not just China. Also countries like Turkey, Hungary, many countries of the world are buying gold as fast as they possibly can. I think that there is something to that. Now, on exactly when the flip will switch, the switch will flip, I have no idea. But I think that I'm looking at the overall trend. Timing is very, very hard. And what impacts Trump will have on pushing back against this. And, you read his tweets and, we're not going to be the world's sucker anymore. Like, I don't think you really understand how this works. I mean, it's the rest of the world who's been your sucker. You've been, exporting dollars and inflation, and they've been sending you real goods. And, it's kind of the opposite. But he has an amazing way of framing things that, I don't know, it's very creative.
Well, yeah, that's part of the podcasting I've been doing and, other actual research too, the last few weeks, is just getting up to speed with some of the more intellectual people behind Trump's tariff strategies and things like that. And it does seem, among other realizations I came to, that they do have these competing objectives. On the one hand, they want to stop what they view as, the erosion of U.S. manufacturing and offshoring and things like that. But also they want to maintain the dollar is the world's reserve currency. And there is some recognition that those kind of, like, that's the benefit of having the printing press, is that other people have to make stuff in their factories and send to you, and you just give them $100 bills, metaphorically. So you can see the benefit of that, but then you can't complain at the same time about, well, gee, how come all the factories are leaving our place and going abroad when, that's one of the things that would be the result of that system.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. And then when they say, oh, we're gonna tax everybody else on this, and they're gonna pay it. Really? You really think people, other countries and companies who manufacture things overseas are just going to pay an extra 25%, and they'll just eat that 25% out of their profits? You don't think that the price of goods will go up in the US? Like it's absolutely ridiculous how this works. Things are going to get difficult in the US. If he continues on this strategy, cost of living is going to go through the roof. And I don't think people are mentally prepared for it. Like if we look at Milei in Argentina and what he said he would do in that country, he mentally prepared people. He told people, this is going to be ridiculously hard. You're going to hate it. But at the end, things will be better. Trump's like, everything's going to be fine. We're going to make everybody else pay for it. You're going to be okay. And, we're going to make America great again. It's like, okay, but if you're putting a tariff on everything, everything's going to go up in price. And I don't know. It's really mind-boggling to me.
Okay, that you just walked into the next thing I was going to ask you about was Milei. So, again, what do you want to tell us in terms of your report card for him? And I guess ideally, if you could tell us when he first came in, how'd you think his first year was going to be? And then now, having seen it, did it live up to what you predicted, or were you surprised?
So, all right, we have to understand Argentina. I mean, that country, when people say Argentina was a basket case, it's because the country went bankrupt something like 20 times. They've devalued their currency. They had the black market. They had the blue market. They had the official rate. Their currency.
What's the blue market? I don't even know what that is.
It was like a unofficial, official currency conversion between, dollars and the real rate of the currency. Like I remember I was in Argentina once and I needed to get a little bit of money so that we could, I don't know, pay for dinner or something like that. And so we had the contact of somebody, and we met them at the back of a handbag store in an aisle with all these handbags, and we passed them like 3 $100 bills, and we got back a paper bag filled with money. Like gangster roll, like these huge wads of cash. And I think in a week, we couldn't even go through this wad of cash because it just went so far because things were so cheap. And it was just a ridiculous amount. But it was like the inflation, was like, I don't know. What we would think is a terrible amount for a year, they were going through monthly. And so they've just had so many problems there. So they brought in Milei. He's, libertarian or libertarian leaning. He says
he calls himself an anarcho-capitalist.
He calls himself. This is why I got to be very careful, because he calls himself an anarcho-capitalist, but that's not the definition I would use of an anarcho-capitalist. But it's 2025, and all words, are subject to change, and they're rewriting dictionaries and whatever. So, I think he's done a really good job, to be honest with you. I think he has a lot of opposition. There's a lot of status quo of people that they didn't want things to get better because, they were lining their own pockets. And I think he's been very brave in these things. Has he made mistakes? Yes, absolutely he has. But he's also done some amazing things and stood up to, the WEF and, calling out some horrible people and what they're doing and vilified thing. There was something recently he did where he, propped up some coin on Twitter. Obviously I don't agree with that, but you got to, accept, just like Trump. Like, I will recognize the good things that he's doing and I will call out the bad things that he's doing. Don't hate on me because I call a spade a spade. In my opinion, there's good things that all of these guys are doing. Same with the Bukelis, who we talked about before. But I think he's doing good. It's funny also. Milei retweets some of my tweets now. So that's been kind of fun to watch with that. And, I'm looking forward to see what he'll do with the rest of his term, and hopefully, in the future as well. And, who knows, maybe I'll start relocating clients there. I'm not at that point at this exact moment, but, I'm definitely open to it in the future, and reserve the right to, change my mind about any of these types of things. I don't say things that I'm going to be dogmatic about or stay with it forever. If he does bad things, I'll change my mind. If he does even better things, I might move people there. We'll see what happens.
Okay, well, people are going to think this was choreographed, but that truly is. You're now leading into what I was going to, in the remaining time here, we have pivot and ask you now to hone in on your business expertise. So I realize there's a bit of a give and take here that, you want to intrigue the listeners and give them valuable information, but also you want them to seek out your services. So with whatever degree of specificity and, how much in terms of the showing them a little bit as a tease you want to get into, I guess, big picture, if somebody's like, yeah, in principle, I know I should have a plan B, like you're talking, but that's just such a pain. Like I don't have enough money for that. Anyway, for somebody who thinks if I were a better person, if I had saved more or whatever, but I'm just not there right now. Is there, do you find working with people that they're surprised by how easy it is to get some backup plans in place?
So it's a good question. So first of all, we put out 95% of our work for free on our website at expatmoney.com. We do something like 4 blog articles a week on there, 2,000 word, 2,500 word essays about different immigration and tax strategies and privacy and structures and trusts and foundations and banking and anything and everything under the sun for offshore. That's all free. I mean, hundreds upon hundreds of articles. Our podcast, the Expat Money Show, has been going for 8 years straight, 350 odd episodes, somewhere around that, of podcast episodes, talking about these types of things. This space, it's not an all or nothing. Okay. Mm-hmm. I don't want people to come through and be like, all right, I need to do everything or I'm not going to get the benefit. Actually, small steps can really make a big difference, like having an offshore bank account or having an offshore depository precious metals account, vaulting service. If you guys go to expatmoney.com/gold, we've got all the information there on a partner we work with and all the how to set it up, and it's all there. It's like, maybe it's worthwhile to move a little bit of gold and silver offshore. So if something happens, you can access it. Same with the, having a company formation, or if you have an online business, a merchant account, it might be worthwhile to have an international merchant account, Stripe or PayPal or a third-party service. If you want to have real estate, which I'm a big fan of real estate, why have everything in your backyard? Why not have something overseas? Like you can get a brand new construction property in Paraguay, like a 1-bedroom apartment for $65,000, and you can cash flow at it, maybe 9%, 8, 9, 10% on it. That might make sense for someone, but, dip your toe in the water, try a couple of things, see how it works. If you like it, then do a little bit more and you just build on it. And as you build on it, your freedom increases. So that's the way that I look at it. And like I said, even if you're not, super ultra high net worth, no problem. Go to our website. Everything is there to help you through the process. If you are high net worth individual and you want additional help with it, happy to help you. No problem. We've got different levels of programs. We have a do-it-yourself program with all the information, all the contacts. Then we have a group consulting program, and then we have a one-on-one consulting program. So, every kind of price range is there.
Well, great. So just maybe to unpack one of those. So the thing about having the offshore gold depository or precious metals is that, I mean, I think people can totally understand why, in an uncertain environment, I want to have precious metals. But the reason for having it offshore is what, that if for some reason something goes on with the country you're living in and you just got to get out of Dodge and maybe your domestic stuff is shut down or whatever, you now have your credentials if you just need to get to an internet access, in this other country, and then you have access to the metal that's being stored. Is that the idea?
Yeah. I mean, having assets outside of your home country can be very, very valuable. I think, I'm not saying we don't need to report it or there's not taxes or anything like that. If you're a US citizen, you still owe taxes on worldwide income, but just having assets outside of your country makes a lot of people feel a lot safer. Just look at Canadian truckers. Okay. Mm-hmm. I told you before, I'm Canadian citizen. I have clients who donated to the trucker convoy and they had their bank accounts shut down. Okay. And that was a peaceful protest. They were protesting mandatory vaccines, and they stood up and said this is wrong. And I think that those people are heroes, and you should push back against these types of things. And the government came in and enacted the Emergencies Act and froze bank accounts. So there was stories of people who were not able to pay their electricity bill. It's the middle of winter and you can't pay your electricity bill in Canada. That's problematic, But if you had an offshore bank account and you had a card program, a Visa or a MasterCard, you still have access to those funds, or a debit card, or be able to do international transfers. So having access to funds outside of your home country, there is real value in this.
Yeah, I believe there were even cases of U.S. citizens or businesses that donated and then had their bank accounts temporarily shut down just for the sin of giving money to those people. So that was, extra outrageous.
Yeah. And then when you add in the debanking, if you look at Nigel Farage in the UK, if you look at Mercola in the US, if you look even at Trump himself, when he was under attack, they were debanking him. Okay, those are the big high profile cases, but there's tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of normal everyday Americans who are being debanked all the time because they don't like the nature of the business. And so they call it like de-risking. Well, I mean, you're cutting off someone's ability to accept capital for a goods or services. That's pretty wild, like you might want to defend against that. If you have any type of a business that, could be vilified at one point. I mean, and the line of what is being vilified and what's going through cancel culture is going, it gets completely wacky and bizarre now. You don't have to be, radical. There's just normal everyday people who just don't agree, and so they're being canceled.
Just on that point, I know some people in the blockchain space in the United States who were saying that, yeah, it's well known in our circles that, it wasn't like 100% rule, but people who are just doing very innocuous things like, buying warehouses of servers for people who are mining Bitcoin, stuff like that, it's not, and they were having trouble just getting a bank account for their business. And like you're saying, that's kind of a big deal if you can't get a bank account for your business. There was no allegation. They weren't charged with anything. They were, the government didn't say you're being naughty. Like they just mysteriously, they all kind of noticed that, a lot of us are having trouble just getting a bank account. That seems kind of weird.
Yeah, I think it's a shadow ban on a lot of these types of things. I don't think that they will ever come out and just tell you. They just blame compliance departments, And now the compliance departments, you can't meet the compliance officer. The client can't talk directly to the compliance. Like it's this shadow organization through financial accounts, bank accounts, mutual funds, insurance companies, real estate. I mean, there's just so many compliance issues. You have to just surrender everything. And if you get refused, they have no obligation to tell you why. And so,
and going along with this too, I'm glad you mentioned that, you're not advising people to do stuff that's against the tax. Like this is all being, above board, because the thing is,
we always work with lawyers. Everything is completely white labeled on everything we do. What I'm talking about is if they don't like your politics, or they don't like your stance on climate change, or they don't like your stance on diversity hires or things like this, that maybe you won't have access to financial markets.
Right. That's and again, it's that even though, you might say, oh, well, they have rules in place. Right. There are some rules, thank goodness, still, even though they're being eroded in terms of what they have to do procedurally before they throw you in a cage. But as we've said, they can just flip a switch. It's not like the truckers who got their funds turned off, or the sort of shadow debanking I'm talking about with these people in the blockchain. It's not like there was a trial and they were convicted by a jury of their peers. Like it just happened.
Yep. And the things that we're talking about are not illegal. Like, okay, in the United States and Canada, we have freedom of assembly, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly. So to protest mandatory vaccines, like they should be allowed to do that. And if you're sending $50 to them to support because you think that what they're doing is a good thing, and now you have your bank account shut off, it's crazy. Yeah, it's crazy.
Okay, so that the people understand in terms of getting their feet wet and setting up systems like that, even if it's not that you're going to just go full expat. So how do people, do you have any general advice in terms of someone says, should I start thinking about getting multiple passports, or, how do you advise them on that capacity?
Yeah, I mean, we work a lot with immigration. We do government-approved projects. So, there's different residencies. There's different ways to get a permanent residency in another country, which is your legal right to live and work in the country. The second citizenship, there's a half a dozen different ways. to get it. It can be done through Ancestry if your family's from Ireland, Italy, Portugal, Spain, Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia, Poland, lots of different countries out there in Europe. You can probably get a second passport that way. You can do naturalization. So by living in a country for a certain amount of time, you can have, I mentioned before, my kids are born in different countries. So my kids all have different citizenships because they have birthright citizenship. You can do citizenship by investment, where you're making a meaningful contribution to a country, and in return, they make you a citizen. So, for example, I have St. Kitts citizenship. I made a donation to the government of St. Kitts and Nevis, and in return, they made me a citizen and give me a passport for it. Completely government approved. Yeah, I mean, you can read about it on our website at expatmoney.com. There are lots of options on these types of things. Now, which one is the best is always going to be dependent on what are your goals and what are your objectives. Like, what are we trying to accomplish together? What are we doing a threat analysis? Like, what are we protecting against? What's your family like? What is your background, your history, all of these things. That's where the consulting really comes into play. Like, I can tell, we can be here for 10 hours and I can tell you about all the different programs in the world. Mm-hmm. But without knowing, you and your family structure and, what your value system is and what you're trying to accomplish, it doesn't work. We need to have that time to get to know each other. It has to be a back and forth. So that's part of the big value proposition with working with me, is I can give a lot of context, a lot of perspective, and, really take the time to get to know you as an individual. Makes sense?
Okay. Yeah, totally. And that sort of feeds into what I was going to ask you as a follow-up, that I'm guessing it's not that you tell everybody, oh yeah, these are the top 3 countries in terms of our freedom index and you should try to go there. It's more, there's a lot of different filters and various things, moving parts, and it really depends on, do you have to be in Miami 3 months out of the year because of your business? Then you probably don't want to move to China or stuff like that.
Correct. It's quite complex. That's why all the consulting programs I do are for a year. So it's not just one-off call. Like, often I'm meeting with clients on a weekly basis for the first 2, 3, 4 months, and then it'll probably go monthly after that once all the plan is ready. And then we brought in the lawyers. Like, I helped build out the team of all the lawyers and accountants and property developers, precious metal depositories, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then I'm on the call with you every step of the way with the lawyers. So, you have someone in your corner who's asking additional questions on your behalf. They can explain things. As I affectionately call, I translate English to English. Mm-hmm. A lot of lawyers maybe do not explain things in a very clear and concise manner. I have a very, I don't know. I talk to my kids. I tell them it's one of my superpowers is taking very complex subjects and trying to make them easily understandable. And I think it's a really, amazing gift that I have. I think anybody in the world can take a subject and make it more complicated. I think it takes real art to try to take something and make it really, really simple. I hope that, in our conversation today and in my podcast, that I take, big concepts and try to break them down in bite-sized pieces that people get. I know with the lawyers that I work with, when I have the client on there, the lawyer will say something and then you get this kind of puzzled look on the client's face, and then I reframe it and, put it in context and everything like that. And then they start nodding their head and they're like, oh, okay, now that makes sense. And because I have experience in all of the different mediums that I work in, we do what we affectionately call the 4+1. It's the tax, the immigration, the investment, the wealth protection, and then the +1 is the lifestyle. That's the one that ties everything together. I can tell you from a financial background, I can tell you from a legal background, I can tell you from a tax, from an investment, where if you're talking to, a CPA or something, he's only going to be able to tell you from the tax. He's not going to tell you how it's going to affect, the financial performance. They're not going to tell you how it qualifies you for residency, for a second passport or anything like that. So having one person who can quarterback all of this, for a lot of my clients, it's very valuable.
Okay, well, that's very good. I guess the last thing I want to ask you is just to be a bit of a devil's advocate, because I've heard this. I've been big for a long time telling people, not that I am in a position to advise them, but just saying, like, even domestically, say, hey, I think you should get multiple streams of income if the economy's going to be in trouble, and then likewise geographically, just getting other things up and running so you're not scrambling and trying to find a new apartment abroad when you realize, oh, I got to get out of the country. You don't want to be doing the research when it's already too late, that kind of thing. But some pushback I've gotten from people is to say, like, there's a famous Ronald Reagan quote that I don't remember the exact words, but we have to make a stand here. If freedom falls in the United States, then there's no place to go on earth. So that's what a lot of Americans tell me is like, no, that's kind of, we're just surrendering. And if we just go abroad to try to remain free, then we've just given up and all of planet Earth is doomed. So how do you, have you ever encountered that kind of reaction? And what do you have to say to that?
I'm not patriotic. I've never felt patriotism on every level. So it's not something that I get. I don't care about, I don't know, Canadian hockey teams or something like that. It doesn't matter to me.
Well, it's a good thing because we just beat you guys. Sorry.
That's fantastic. It doesn't matter to me at all. Because I care first and foremost about my wife and my kids. And then I care about my clients, and then it kind of goes in, circles outwards. Because I happen to be born in Canada doesn't mean that I feel any affinity towards, I don't know, someone else who happened to be born, it doesn't even have to be in the same city. I mean, Canada is so big, US is so big, it could be 1,000 kilometers away. Just like I don't believe in communal guilt that, okay, something happened in World War II that I'm going to blame some 25-year-old German. Like, that makes no sense to me whatsoever. I believe in personal responsibility. Now, as for your greater comment of, okay, we need to make a stand here, I don't know. Maybe you do, but I think it's always better to come from a place of strength. And if you can have a plan B in place so that if you're going to make a last stand and things go sideways, that you have somewhere else to go. So, quick story. I recently got invited to go back to Canada. It was my first time in 6 years back in Canada. And I got invited to speak at a conference because there was all of these wealthy landowners and business owners in Alberta. And they brought me in because they wanted Alberta to secede from the rest of Canada. And they wanted to go public with a lot of these things. And they recognized the value of having a plan B in place so that if they canceled their bank accounts or, did these nasty things that they do, that they had something that they could rely on in the background. And so these people were going to stay and fight, but we helped a lot of people with now getting residencies and bank accounts and, precious metals and all these things overseas. And now they can come at that from a place of strength. For me, this makes a lot of sense. Why you want to, stay there, be paying your taxes, feeding the opposition. You have all of your eggs in one basket, and now you're going to poke the bear in the eye. That sounds, I don't know. Sounds like a bad idea.
Okay, so that very good. Thank you. I'm glad that was a good answer. Thank you for that, because it's at first I understood and I wouldn't have thought any less of it. Just saying, hey, I'm my own person and I care about my family. But then you're right. Even for someone who's going to stand their ground, and even not just financially, but like if you had little kids or you had a bunch of other relatives that that you didn't want to be sitting there while you go toe to toe with the man, it'd be good to have a place abroad to, so you can send your 8-year-old to.
They canceled Mercola's bank account, his entire C-suite, and all of the spouse's bank accounts. That's nasty. Yeah. That's like, they're really trying to set an example. It's because they didn't like something he said in an email out to his list. That's crazy.
Can you, I know the name, but can you just give a little more as to people who don't know what you're talking about?
So Dr. Mercola is very big in the alternative health space, and he writes a really, prominent newsletter and was talking out about the vaccines. And so they made an example out of him.
Okay. Yeah. So there you go. And again, it's not like that is illegal. You should be able to do that.
Nothing he did was illegal. Nothing he did was illegal in any of these instances. I mean, he was writing, questioning the narrative. And then this is what they did to him as recourse.
Yep. So just another example as to why. And again, with all this stuff, it would be good if it turns out that, oh yeah, it was a false alarm. You know, that would be better to be prepared than not need it than the opposite. So there you go.
Well, and as well, everything that we're trying to do, okay, we want it to also make sense from a good financial decision. So we're buying quality real estate overseas with cash. You don't have to take out huge mortgages or anything like that. We're doing very affordable properties, and you pay cash for it. And then you should be cash flowing at a nice income. And so you can use it yourself. You can rent it out. You can, let your friends go and use it and go on vacation and things like that. So it should still make good financial sense. It should still make good lifestyle sense. It doesn't have to be a drain. It shouldn't be a negative. It should be a positive in all of these things. And by the way, it's fun and it's interesting, and you get to go to a new place. You get to meet cool people and do something exciting. Like I love all of the work that we do. I think it's amazing. These are not negatives. These are positives.
And speaking of meeting new people, I realized maybe the last thing we'll hear, let you plug. You've got as this episode drops, you've got an in-person conference coming up. Do you want to tell the listeners the details?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you guys go to expatmoney.com/conference, we've got a new event coming. It is our first large in-person conference. We'll probably have about 200 people flying in. We've got speakers from all over the world. It's going to be a 2-day event. The first day is all conference. Then we've got a VIP dinner. Second day, we're going to be doing a city tour. We're going to take people out to an off-grid community that we're building in the highlands. This is mature fruit trees on site, solar panels, well water, a really amazing place. Actually, you guys can learn more about that at veritaspanama.com. And then we're going to go and see the beaches. And then that night, we're going to be doing my birthday party. So we've got live band, open bar, tons of food. And it doesn't matter if, you're brand new to our community or you've been in the community for the last 10 years. Everybody's welcome. It's super, super open event. And, these are the lawyers and the accountants and everybody that I work with every single day. And I've built this amazing network of people that I want you to get a chance to shake their hand. I'm grateful to the internet, and it's amazing to be able to have a video call with you today. I'm so grateful for that. But it would be cool to shake your hand and look you in the eye and spend time with you in person. I think that, especially after the last 5 years where everything went digital, I think human interaction is something that, is very valuable, as I've mentioned a couple times before in this conversation. And I just don't think there's any replacing it. So that's what I want to do. I want to have a huge event with getting all the coolest people in the world together and getting everybody eating together and drinking together, and families are welcome. There's going to be kids and activities, and that's going to be amazing. So if you guys want more information, you can join the newsletter. It'll all be there, or go to expatmoney.com/conference, and you can learn about it on that page.
Well, that is a great place to stop. Folks, my guest this episode has been Mikkel Thorpe, the founder and CEO of ExPat Money. Mikkel, thanks so much for everything you've been doing and for sharing your insights with us.
Pleasure's all mine. Thanks so much.
And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We'll see you next time.